Have you ever noticed that some people become more grateful the more you help them, while others become more demanding? At first, the difference isn't obvious. Someone asks for a small favor. You help them. They need advice. You give it. They run into trouble. You support them. Everything seems normal. You think you're building a friendship. You think you're helping someone get back on their feet. You think you're doing what a good person is supposed to do. But then something strange starts happening. The favors become more frequent. The requests become bigger. The expectations become higher. And before you realize it, a relationship that started with kindness has turned into a burden. Many people have experienced this, but struggle to explain it. Why does helping some people lead to stronger relationships, while helping others creates endless problems? The answer has very little to do with money, status, education, or background. It has everything to do with mindset. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that everyone thinks the same way they do. If you're responsible, you assume other people value responsibility. If you're grateful, you assume other people appreciate help. If you're loyal, you assume loyalty is respected. Unfortunately, that's not always true. Some people see help as an opportunity. Others see help as a resource to consume. That's a massive difference. The first type of person looks at assistance and says, "How can I use this chance to improve my situation?" The second type asks, "How much more can I get?" One mindset creates growth. The other creates dependency. And dependency is where many problems begin. Think about it. When someone believes they are responsible for improving their own life, every bit of support becomes valuable. If you give them advice, they act on it. If you introduce them to someone, they respect the opportunity. If you help them once, they try not to need help again. They want to stand on their own feet. But people with a victim mindset often see things differently. Deep down, they believe that someone else should solve their problems. Someone else should rescue them. Someone else should provide the opportunities. Someone else should carry the burden. Because of that belief, they approach relationships differently. Instead of asking, "What can I contribute?" they ask, "What can I receive?" Instead of building value, they're constantly looking for value. And when someone enters a relationship with that mentality, it creates an imbalance from the very beginning. The strange thing is that these people don't always look selfish. In fact, many of them appear extremely vulnerable. They may tell you about their struggles, their bad luck, their difficult childhood, their financial problems, their failed relationships, their toxic family, their unfair boss, their toxic family. And sometimes those problems are completely real. Life can be incredibly difficult. Everyone goes through hard times. The issue isn't having problems. The issue is refusing to take responsibility for solving them. There's a huge difference. Strong people can experience terrible circumstances and still focus on what they can control. Victim-minded people focus almost entirely on what they cannot. They become experts at explaining why nothing works, why every opportunity failed, why every plan collapsed, why every person disappointed them, why every setback wasn't their fault. After a while, a pattern starts to emerge. The details change, the excuses change, the stories change, but the conclusion is always the same. Someone else is responsible. Someone else should fix it. Someone else should help. And if you're a compassionate person, this mindset can trap you. Because you naturally want to help. You see potential in people. You see their pain. You see their struggles. And you think, maybe they just need a chance. So you give them one. Then another. Then another. What many people don't realize is that helping someone and carrying someone are two completely different things. Helping gives people strength. Carrying removes responsibility. And once people become used to being carried, they often stop trying to walk on their own. That's why some relationships become exhausting. No matter how much support you provide, the situation never seems to improve. The crisis changes, but the pattern remains. One problem gets solved, another appears. One emergency ends, a new emergency begins. One complaint disappears, a different complaint takes its place. It's like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much you give, it never feels like enough. At first, you tell yourself you're being patient. Then you tell yourself you're being understanding. Then you tell yourself they just need a little more time. Months pass, sometimes years, and suddenly you realize something uncomfortable. The relationship only moves in one direction. You give, they take. You support, they depend. You solve, they return with another problem. This realization can be difficult because most good people don't like judging others. Nobody wants to believe that their kindness is being taken advantage of. Nobody wants to think badly of someone they've tried to help. But maturity requires seeing reality clearly. Not everyone who struggles is dangerous. Not everyone who needs help is a burden. Some of the strongest people in the world have gone through incredibly difficult periods in their lives. The real warning sign isn't struggle. The warning sign is entitlement. It's the belief that other people owe them something. It's the expectation that support should be automatic. It's the anger that appears when help isn't provided. That's when relationships start becoming unhealthy. Because genuine gratitude creates appreciation. Entitlement creates expectations. And expectations have no limit. The more you provide, the more is expected. The more available you become, the more access people demand. The more generous you are, the more generosity becomes normal. Eventually, what was once appreciated becomes assumed. That's why wisdom isn't just knowing when to help people, it's knowing who you're helping. A person who wants to grow will use your support as a stepping stone. A person who wants dependency will use your support as a permanent source of comfort. From the outside, they may look similar in the beginning. Both ask for help. Both have problems. Both need support. But over time, their actions reveal the difference. One becomes stronger. The other becomes more dependent. One appreciates opportunities. The other expects them. One takes responsibility. The other looks for someone to blame. And understanding that difference can save you from years of frustration, disappointment, and emotional exhaustion. Because some people don't need a savior. They need accountability. And until accountability appears, no amount of help will ever be enough. One of the hardest lessons in life is realizing that not everyone wants to be saved. Most people assume that if someone is struggling, they naturally want a solution. That sounds logical. After all, who wouldn't want a better life? Who wouldn't want more money, more freedom, better relationships, and fewer problems? But reality is often more complicated than that. Many people say they want change. Far fewer people are willing to do what change requires, because change is uncomfortable. Change demands responsibility. Change forces people to confront their own mistakes, habits, weaknesses, and fears. And that's exactly what some people spend their entire lives avoiding. This is where the victim mindset becomes so dangerous. A victim mindset isn't about having bad circumstances. Everyone experiences bad circumstances. People lose jobs, businesses fail, relationships fall apart, families break apart, unexpected disasters happen. Those things are part of life. The victim mindset begins when a person turns temporary hardship into a permanent identity. Instead of saying, "I have a problem," They begin saying, "I am the problem's victim." That shift changes everything, because once someone sees themselves as a permanent victim, they stop looking for solutions. Instead, they start looking for explanations. And explanations are much easier to find than solutions. Every setback becomes proof that the world is unfair. Every failure becomes evidence that somebody else is responsible. Every disappointment becomes another reason to avoid personal accountability. The human mind is incredibly good at protecting itself, sometimes a little too good. Admitting that your life is partly the result of your own decisions can be painful. It's much easier to believe that circumstances, luck, society, family, friends, coworkers, or strangers are responsible for everything. That belief provides emotional comfort, but it comes with a hidden cost. You also give away your power. Because if someone else controls your problems, then someone else must solve them. And that's exactly how dependency begins. People trapped in this mindset often spend years waiting for something external to rescue them. A better boss, a better economy, a better relationship, a better opportunity, a lucky break, a wealthy friend, a helpful family member, some magical event that will finally change everything. Meanwhile, the people who make progress usually focus on a different question, not who's responsible, but what can I do next? That's why two people can face the exact same challenge and end up in completely different places. One spends years complaining, the other spends years adapting. One waits, the other acts. One collects excuses, the other collects experience. The gap gets bigger every year. What's interesting is that victim-minded people are often extremely skilled at attracting sympathy. They know how to tell compelling stories. They know how to explain why things went wrong. They know how to make others feel sorry for them. And to be fair, many of their stories are true. Life may have treated them unfairly. People may have betrayed them. Circumstances may have genuinely worked against them. But eventually, every person reaches a crossroads. At some point, the question stops being, "What happened to you?" and becomes, "What are you going to do about it?" That's the moment personal growth begins. Unfortunately, many people never reach that stage. Instead, they become emotionally attached to their struggles. Their problems become part of their identity. Their suffering becomes part of their story. And without realizing it, they start protecting the very thing that's holding them back. Because if the problem disappears, so does the excuse. If the obstacle disappears, responsibility returns. If nobody is to blame, they must take ownership. And ownership is scary. Ownership means accepting that your future depends largely on your actions. That's a heavy burden. Many people would rather avoid it. This is why some individuals seem stuck in the same place for years. The faces around them change, the jobs change, the cities change, the relationships change, but the pattern stays exactly the same. There's always a reason, always an excuse, always someone else at fault. And eventually, this mindset starts affecting their relationships. Instead of seeing people as equals, they start seeing people as resources. Not intentionally, not maliciously, just habitually. They begin evaluating everyone around them based on one question: what can this person do for me? Can they give me money? Can they solve my problem? Can they open a door? Can they introduce me to someone? Can they make my life easier? At first, this thinking seems harmless, but over time, it changes the nature of every relationship. Because genuine relationships are built on mutual respect. Victim-minded relationships are built on dependency, and dependency always creates pressure.
The stronger person becomes the caretaker. The weaker person becomes the receiver. The relationship slowly loses balance. One person carries responsibility, the other avoids it. One person gives energy, the other consumes it. One person grows tired, the other grows entitled. This process rarely happens overnight. It's gradual, so gradual that many people don't notice it until they're already emotionally exhausted. They find themselves constantly fixing problems that aren't theirs, constantly managing someone else's emotions, constantly providing support that never seems to make a lasting difference. And every time they try to pull back, they're met with guilt. You've changed. You don't care anymore. I thought you were my friend. You know what I'm going through. These statements can be powerful because good-hearted people naturally want to help, but help becomes unhealthy when it removes responsibility instead of encouraging it. Real support should make people stronger. It should increase independence. It should build confidence. It should move people towards self-sufficiency. If years go by and someone remains just as dependent as before, something is wrong. The goal of support isn't to create permanent reliance. The goal is to help people become capable of standing on their own. That's why successful people often have a different approach to helping others. They'll offer advice, they'll offer opportunities, they'll offer guidance, but they're careful about becoming someone's permanent solution because they understand a truth that many people learn the hard way. You can solve someone's immediate problem. You cannot solve their mindset for them. And if the mindset doesn't change, the problems eventually come back in a different form. The names change, the circumstances change, the excuses change, but the cycle continues. Because until a person accepts responsibility for their own life, no opportunity, no mentor, no friendship, and no amount of support can permanently transform their situation. Real change begins the moment someone stops asking, "Who will save me?" and starts asking, "What can I do with the life I have right now?"
One of the most confusing experiences in life is being hurt by someone you tried to help. Most people expect the opposite. They assume that kindness creates loyalty. They assume that support creates gratitude. They assume that helping someone during a difficult time will strengthen the relationship. Sometimes it does, but sometimes something completely different happens. Instead of appreciation, you get resentment. Instead of respect, you get hostility. Instead of loyalty, you get betrayal. And when it happens, it can be shocking. You find yourself wondering, after everything I did for them, how could they treat me like this? The answer often has less to do with what you did and more to do with how they see themselves. Human beings naturally compare themselves to others. Whether we admit it or not, we're constantly measuring our position in the world. We compare our income, our lifestyle, our relationships, our achievements, our status, our appearance, our success. Most of the time, these comparisons happen automatically. We don't even realize we're doing it. But comparison becomes dangerous when someone already feels insecure. Imagine a person who constantly struggles financially. Then they become friends with someone successful. At first, they're impressed. They admire that person. They appreciate the advice. They appreciate the opportunities. They appreciate the help. Everything seems positive. But over time, another emotion can begin to appear, an emotion that many people don't want to admit. Envy. Not because the successful person did anything wrong, but because their success becomes a constant reminder of what the other person lacks. Every achievement becomes a comparison. Every win becomes a mirror. Every improvement highlights the gap between where they are and where they wish they were.
For emotionally mature people, this creates motivation. They think, if they can do it, maybe I can learn from them. But people trapped in a victim mindset often respond differently. Instead of inspiration, they feel resentment. Instead of curiosity, they feel bitterness. Instead of learning, they start looking for reasons to tear the other person down. Because admitting that someone else earned what they have can be painful. It's easier to believe the successful person was lucky. It's easier to believe they had unfair advantages. It's easier to believe they don't deserve what they have. This protects the ego, and the ego is very good at protecting itself. In fact, sometimes people would rather damage a relationship than confront an uncomfortable truth about themselves. Think about how strange that is. Someone helps you, supports you, opens doors for you, gives you advice, encourages you. And yet, instead of feeling grateful, you become angry. From the outside, it makes no sense, but psychologically, it happens more often than people realize. Because every act of help can create an uncomfortable feeling of dependence. Dependence reminds people that they need assistance, and needing assistance can make insecure individuals feel weak. Over time, that discomfort grows. Instead of appreciating the person helping them, they start resenting the feeling of needing help in the first place. And because they don't want to blame themselves, they redirect that frustration toward the helper. This is one reason why some people eventually attack the very people who supported them. Not because the support was harmful, but because the support exposed their own insecurity. You'll often notice a predictable pattern. At first, they're extremely thankful. Then they become comfortable. Then they become entitled. Then they become critical. Finally, they become hostile. The transformation can be gradual, so gradual that you barely notice it happening. Small comments start appearing, subtle disrespect, passive-aggressive remarks, backhanded compliments, dismissive attitudes. You feel something has changed, but you can't quite explain it. Then, one day, the relationship suddenly explodes. A small disagreement becomes a major conflict. A simple boundary becomes a personal attack. A reasonable refusal becomes proof that you're selfish. And you're left wondering how things deteriorated so quickly. The truth is, they usually didn't. The resentment was building beneath the surface for a long time. What changed was that it finally became visible. This is why boundaries are so important. Without boundaries, some people start confusing generosity with obligation. They stop seeing your help as a gift. They start seeing it as your responsibility. And once someone believes you owe them something, appreciation disappears. Think about it. Nobody feels grateful for something they believe they're entitled to. Gratitude only exists when people recognize that something was freely given. The moment entitlement enters the picture, gratitude leaves. That's when relationships become dangerous, because no amount of giving can satisfy an entitled mindset. The more you provide, the more becomes expected. The more accessible you are, the more access people demand. The more generous you become, the less your generosity is valued. Eventually, the relationship reaches a point where disappointment becomes inevitable. Why? Because expectations always grow faster than reality. No matter how much you do, there will eventually be a limit. You have your own life, your own responsibilities, your own goals, your own problems. At some point, you'll say no, and that's when the true nature of the relationship often reveals itself. A healthy person respects your boundary. An entitled person resents it. A healthy person understands that your life doesn't belong to them. An entitled person feels abandoned. A healthy person remains grateful for what you already did. An entitled person focuses only on what you didn't do. That difference tells you everything. One of the hardest lessons successful people learn is that not everyone deserves unlimited access to their time, energy, and resources. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean becoming selfish. It doesn't mean refusing to help others. It simply means understanding that kindness without boundaries often creates dependency rather than growth. And dependence has a dark side, because the longer someone depends on you for things they should be handling themselves, the more likely they are to resent you for the very dependence they helped create. That's why wisdom isn't just about being generous, it's about being selective. The goal isn't to save everyone. The goal is to help people who are willing to help themselves. Because those are the people who turn support into growth, opportunity into progress, and gratitude into lasting relationships. Everyone else may eventually turn your kindness into a burden you were never meant to carry.
The biggest mistake most people make is waiting until a relationship becomes toxic before they pay attention. By that point, the damage has already been done. The stress has already accumulated. The frustration has already built up. The emotional exhaustion is already there. What makes draining relationships so dangerous is that they rarely start out looking dangerous. In the beginning, everything feels normal. Sometimes they even feel rewarding. You feel needed. You feel useful. You feel like you're making a difference in someone's life. And for good-hearted people, that's a powerful feeling. Everyone likes helping others. Everyone likes feeling appreciated. Everyone believes they're having a positive impact. The problem is that emotional drain doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives little by little, one request at a time, one favor at a time, one excuse at a time, until eventually you realize you're carrying far more weight than you ever agreed to. That's why learning to recognize the warning signs early can save you from years of unnecessary stress. The first warning sign is a lack of personal responsibility. Pay attention to how people talk about their problems. Do they acknowledge their own mistakes? Do they take ownership when things go wrong? Or is every story filled with villains? The bad boss, the toxic friend, the jealous coworker, the unfair customer, the selfish partner, the corrupt system, the unlucky situation. Of course, sometimes those things are real. Life isn't always fair. But if someone has a new villain in every chapter of their life, sooner or later you have to ask a difficult question. What is the common denominator? Strong people can admit when they've made mistakes. Weak-minded people often spend all their energy avoiding accountability, and people who avoid accountability rarely grow, because growth begins where excuses end. The second warning sign is chronic dependence. Everyone needs help sometimes. There is nothing wrong with asking for support. Healthy people ask for help when necessary. Unhealthy people build their entire lifestyle around needing help. At first, the requests seem reasonable. Then they become constant. Every decision requires your advice. Every challenge requires your involvement. Every setback becomes your problem too. Before long, you realize something strange. They're not becoming stronger, they're becoming more dependent. Your support isn't solving the issue, it's becoming part of the issue. A healthy relationship should create more independence over time, not less. The third warning sign is entitlement. This is where many relationships quietly begin to fall apart. At first, people appreciate what you do. They thank you. They respect your effort. They acknowledge your sacrifice. But over time, appreciation can slowly transform into expectation. What was once a favor becomes normal. What was once generosity becomes obligation. What was once appreciated becomes assumed. And once that happens, things start changing. You notice fewer thank yous. You notice more demands. You notice more disappointment when you don't immediately respond. You notice frustration whenever you say no. That's entitlement. And entitlement is one of the most destructive attitudes any relationship can develop. Because entitled people focus less on what you've already done and more on what you haven't done yet. No amount of giving ever feels sufficient. There is always another expectation waiting around the corner. The fourth warning sign is a lack of reciprocity. Healthy relationships don't require perfect balance. Nobody keeps score in real friendships. Nobody measures every favor. Nobody tracks every act of kindness. But healthy relationships do involve mutual effort. Both people contribute. Both people care. Both people invest. The exact contributions may be different, but the effort is there. Draining relationships are different. The flow goes only one direction. You call them, they rarely call you. You support them, they disappear when you need support. You listen to their problems, they have no interest in yours. You make sacrifices, they make excuses. And because you're a generous person, you keep telling yourself it's temporary. You keep waiting for things to balance out. But they never do, because the imbalance isn't accidental, it's part of the relationship's foundation. The fifth warning sign is something many people overlook. They only contact you when they need something. Think about that for a moment. How often do they check on you? How often do they celebrate your success? How often do they reach out with no agenda, no request, no favor, no problem to solve, no crisis to discuss, just genuine interest? If every interaction begins with a need, you're probably not dealing with a friendship, you're dealing with a transaction. And the moment you stop providing value, the relationship often disappears. That's a painful realization, but an important one. The sixth warning sign is how they react to boundaries. This may be the most revealing sign of all. Healthy people respect boundaries. They may not love them, they may feel disappointed, but they understand them. They recognize that you have your own responsibilities, priorities, and limitations. Emotionally immature people react differently. A simple boundary feels like rejection. A reasonable no feels like betrayal. A delayed response feels like disrespect. Instead of respecting your limits, they pressure you to remove them. And that tells you something important. They don't want access based on mutual respect. They want access based on emotional pressure. That's not friendship. That's control. One of the most valuable skills you can develop in life is the ability to observe patterns instead of promises. People make promises every day. They promise they'll change. They promise they'll improve. They promise they'll pay you back. They promise they'll be different next time. Maybe they mean it, maybe they don't. But patterns reveal what words often hide. Patterns show priorities. Patterns reveal character. Patterns expose intentions. If someone repeatedly creates chaos, that's a pattern. If someone repeatedly avoids responsibility, that's a pattern. If someone repeatedly takes without giving, that's a pattern. And if someone repeatedly ignores boundaries, that's definitely a pattern. Many people stay trapped in draining relationships because they keep believing future promises instead of present behavior. They focus on potential. They focus on intentions. They focus on what the person could become. Meanwhile, reality keeps giving them the same answer over and over again. The older you get, the more you realize that protecting your peace is not selfish. Protecting your energy is not selfish. Protecting your time is not selfish. These are necessities, because your attention, emotional capacity, and mental focus are limited resources. And if you allow the wrong people unlimited access to those resources, they'll consume them without ever meaningfully improving their own lives. The goal isn't to become cynical. The goal isn't to distrust everyone.
The goal is to recognize the difference between people who need temporary support and people who make dependency a permanent lifestyle. Understanding that difference can completely change the quality of your relationships and ultimately the quality of your life.
As people become more successful, something interesting happens. They don't become less kind. They don't become less caring. They don't become less willing to help. But they become much more selective. From the outside, some people misunderstand this. They assume successful people are cold. They assume they're selfish. They assume success changed them. In reality, many successful people became selective because experience taught them lessons that generosity alone could not. At some point, almost everyone who achieves a certain level of success goes through the same painful realization. Not everyone who asks for help actually wants to grow. Some people want advice. Others want shortcuts. Some people want opportunities. Others want someone to carry them. Some people want guidance. Others want dependency. Learning the difference usually comes from experience, and experience is often expensive. Most successful people can tell stories about people they trusted, people they supported, people they introduced to valuable contacts, people they invested time, money, and energy into, only to discover later that those same people became sources of stress, drama, or betrayal. That experience changes the way you look at relationships. You begin to understand that access is valuable. Your time is valuable. Your attention is valuable. Your reputation is valuable. Your network is valuable. And if you don't protect those things, someone else will eventually misuse them. This is something emotionally mature people understand very well. They know that every relationship carries consequences. Every person you allow into your life has influence. Some people bring clarity. Others bring confusion. Some people create opportunities. Others create problems. Some people add energy. Others consume it. That's why highly effective people are often extremely careful about who they allow into their inner circle, not because they're arrogant, because they're responsible. Think about it this way. If you spent years building a successful business, would you hand over access to anyone who asked? Probably not. If you spent years building a strong reputation, would you let anyone use your name however they wanted? Of course not. If you spent years creating a peaceful life, would you invite constant chaos into it? Most people wouldn't. Yet many people do exactly that with their relationships. They protect their money, they protect their property, they protect their passwords, but they leave their emotional boundaries completely unguarded. Anyone can enter. Anyone can make demands. Anyone can consume their time. Anyone can create drama. And then they wonder why they feel exhausted all the time. Successful people eventually learn that boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are filters. A wall keeps everyone out. A filter lets the right people in while keeping the wrong people out. That's an important distinction. Healthy boundaries don't stop relationships. They improve them. They allow genuine relationships to thrive because expectations become clear. Respect becomes clear. Responsibility becomes clear. The people who respect your boundaries usually respect you as well. The people who constantly fight your boundaries often reveal their true intentions, because boundaries expose motives. Someone who values you for who you are will respect your limits. Someone who values you only for what you provide will resent those limits. That's why the word no is one of the most powerful tools in the world. A simple no reveals information that years of conversation sometimes cannot. When you say no, healthy people adjust. Manipulative people pressure.
Healthy people understand. Entitled people complain. Healthy people respect your decision. Self-centered people take it personally. The response tells you everything. Many successful people also understand something that took them years to learn. Helping people and rescuing people are completely different activities. Helping empowers. Rescuing creates dependency. Helping teaches skills. Rescuing removes responsibility. Helping encourages growth. Rescuing often delays it. When you constantly rescue people from the consequences of their actions, you're not necessarily helping them. Sometimes you're protecting the very behaviors that keep them stuck. This can be difficult for compassionate people to accept, because compassion naturally wants to relieve suffering. But wisdom understands that not all suffering should be removed immediately. Some lessons require discomfort. Some growth requires struggle. Some maturity only develops through responsibility. A person who never experiences consequences rarely develops discipline. A person who never faces accountability rarely develops character. And a person who is constantly rescued rarely develops self-reliance. This is why strong people often focus less on solving people's problems and more on helping them solve problems themselves. Instead of giving endless handouts, they offer guidance. Instead of creating dependence, they create opportunities. Instead of carrying people, they teach people how to carry themselves. That's a huge difference. It's also one of the reasons successful people often maintain healthier relationships. They understand that every relationship should involve some level of mutual respect and personal responsibility. Not perfection, not equality in every situation, but responsibility. Without responsibility, relationships eventually become one-sided, and one-sided relationships eventually become exhausting. Another thing successful people understand is that protecting your peace isn't selfish. In fact, it's necessary. A peaceful mind makes better decisions. A peaceful life creates better opportunities. A peaceful environment allows growth. Chaos does the opposite. Chaos drains attention. Chaos consumes energy. Chaos destroys focus. And some people bring chaos wherever they go. There's always conflict, always drama, always an emergency, always a crisis, always somebody to blame, always another problem. If you spend enough time around that energy, it eventually becomes your energy too. That's why emotionally intelligent people pay close attention to patterns. They don't just listen to what people say, they watch what people repeatedly do, because character is revealed through habits, not speeches. Anyone can promise change. Anyone can make excuses. Anyone can tell a convincing story, but patterns rarely lie. Over time, successful people become less impressed with words and more interested in behavior, less interested in intentions and more interested in actions, less interested in promises and more interested in consistency. And that shift changes everything. Because once you start evaluating people based on patterns rather than emotions, you make better decisions about who deserves access to your life. You stop trying to save everyone. You stop feeling guilty for having boundaries. You stop confusing kindness with unlimited availability. And perhaps most importantly, you realize something many people spend years learning. The people who truly care about you will never require you to sacrifice your peace, your values, or your well-being in order to keep them happy. The people worth keeping in your life will respect your boundaries because they respect you. Everyone else is simply revealing why those boundaries were necessary in the first place.
As you get older, you start noticing a pattern. The biggest problems in life rarely come from strangers. Most strangers don't have enough access to hurt you. They don't have enough influence to drain your energy. They don't occupy enough space in your mind to disrupt your peace. The people who affect your life the most are usually the people you allow close to you. Your friends, your family, your partners, your coworkers, your business associates, the people who have access to your time, your emotions, your attention, and your trust. That's why one of the most important skills you'll ever develop is not the ability to make connections, it's the ability to choose them wisely. Most people spend years learning how to attract opportunities. Far fewer people learn how to protect themselves from the wrong opportunities. The same is true with relationships. Everyone talks about how to meet people, how to network, how to build connections, how to expand your circle. But almost nobody talks about the importance of filtering your circle. And yet, that single skill can completely change the direction of your life. Because relationships are rarely neutral. People either pull you forward or pull you backward. They either bring clarity or confusion. They either encourage growth or reinforce limitations. They either inspire responsibility or normalize excuses. And over time, those influences compound. A single conversation may not matter. A single interaction may not matter. A single favor may not matter. But years of exposure absolutely matter. The people around you shape your standards. They shape your habits. They shape your expectations. They shape the way you think. That's why protecting your environment is so important. Not because you're better than anyone, not because you're judging people, but because your life is heavily influenced by what you repeatedly tolerate. If you constantly tolerate negativity, negativity becomes normal. If you constantly tolerate manipulation, manipulation becomes normal. If you constantly tolerate entitlement, entitlement becomes normal. And if you constantly tolerate people who refuse to take responsibility for their lives, eventually you start carrying responsibilities that were never yours to begin with. Many people spend years feeling exhausted without understanding why. They assume they're overworked. They assume they're stressed. They assume they need more rest. Sometimes that's true, but often the real problem is different. They're surrounded by people who continuously consume emotional energy without ever replenishing it. They're constantly solving problems that aren't theirs, constantly managing emotions that aren't theirs, constantly carrying burdens that don't belong to them. No amount of sleep can fix that. No vacation can permanently solve that, because the source of the exhaustion isn't physical, it's relational. And until the relationships change, the exhaustion remains. One of the hardest truths to accept is that not everyone can come with you as you grow. Some people celebrate your growth. Others become uncomfortable with it. Some people feel inspired when you improve your life. Others feel threatened by it. Some people want you to succeed. Others only want you to succeed as long as you don't surpass them. This isn't something people usually admit openly, but you can often see it in their behavior. When good things happen to you, do they genuinely celebrate, or do they immediately change the subject? Do they encourage your goals, or do they constantly explain why your goals won't work? Do they support your progress, or do they subtly try to pull you back toward old habits? The answers matter, because the people closest to you have tremendous influence over your future. That's why mature people eventually stop asking one question, "Who likes me?" and start asking a better question, "Who consistently adds value to my life, and whose life am I able to add value to as well?" That's a much healthier foundation for any relationship. Real relationships aren't built on guilt. They're not built on obligation. They're not built on dependency. They're built on mutual respect, mutual effort, mutual growth,
mutual goodwill. The healthiest relationships are the ones where both people become stronger because of the connection, not weaker, not more dependent, not more resentful, stronger. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. You are not responsible for saving everyone. You are not responsible for fixing everyone. You are not responsible for carrying everyone. Every adult is ultimately responsible for their own choices, their own growth, and their own life. You can offer support, you can offer advice, and sometimes it means stepping back and allowing people to face the consequences that will help them grow. Not every problem should become your problem. Not every crisis requires your involvement. Not every request deserves a yes. Learning this doesn't make you selfish, it makes you wise, because your time is limited, your energy is limited, your attention is limited, and where you invest those resources will largely determine the quality of your life. The truth is simple. Kindness is a strength. Compassion is a strength. Generosity is a strength. But without boundaries, those strengths can be exploited. Without discernment, those strengths can be wasted. Without wisdom, those strengths can become burdens. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is not to stop caring. The goal is to care intelligently, to help without becoming responsible for someone else's life, to give without creating dependency, to support without being consumed, and to build relationships based on respect rather than need. Because at the end of the day, the people who truly belong in your life won't be the ones who demand the most from you. They'll be the ones who appreciate your presence, respect your boundaries, and inspire you to become the best version of yourself. Those are the relationships worth protecting. And those are the relationships that make life better, not harder.